say to yourself, well, that wasn't going to go anywhere. That was here to stay. And with all the nonsense that's gone on in the last 2 years, probably, and certainly the last several weeks and months, they were simply wasting time and enormous amounts of money, and they got absolutely nothing to show for it. Nothing.
The problem there, George and Paul, is that, and I think this gets back to the Merlin time track for the United States, which is the most important thing. On your show over the last couple of years, I had stressed that something was going on which would be very similar to the disastrous breakup of a marriage. Back in 2010, we had rage and the Tea Party movement. And then we moved into deep irreconcilable differences, which have plagued the Congress now and the Senate for about 2 to 3 years. I think we've moved on to the final stage, which either ends up with mutual homicide or some kind of separation or divorce agreement. I don't think it's an accident we're seeing separatist movements in about 6 or 7 different states where we have what Thomas Jefferson warned us about in the quote, a democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49. The 51 are rejoicing tonight, not realizing that they've just saw guerrilla tactics used by people like Ted Cruz and others, because they essentially feel like a resigned, subjugated minority with no hope to change things. That's not a good place. And Alexis de Tocqueville, a long time ago, back in the 1700s, warned that the American Republic will endure until the day Congress discovers that it can bribe the public with the public's money.
Yeah.
We're there.
I don't know if you heard this at all tonight, George, but at the end of the vote in the House...
But that's a sideshow, Paul.
Of course it is, but it's a perfect...
Yeah, but the stenographer goes nuts. I'm talking about where the country is, and not even from a political stance. I'm just saying that people better lock down and realize that what we experienced this year is just a prelude to where we're going, and that Merlin made all of this fairly predictable. And that there aren't a whole lot of escape hatches here unless you're fortunate enough to be able to move to New Zealand.
No, well, you're right. I mean, this is a rocky road, and we're not off it yet by any means.
And it can be termed a dysfunctional Congress. The majority doesn't seem to be willing to acknowledge that the Congress didn't get there by accident. They were voted in by the voice of the people reacting to the first 2 years of the Obama administration, and now they just want to roll over them like a tank at Tiananmen Square and rejoice in the action. That attitude, those actions do not end well. You really need a couples counselor. It may be too late for that on a national level, but we are in deep trouble because the United States always had the problem with trying to hang together. The last time we got into these kind of waters, it resulted in the Civil War.
You did a time track, Paul and George, on the United States, and I'm looking at this. So as what you two have taught me over the years, from now through around 2016, a little bit of 2017, with now through the 2015 especially, something huge is going to happen.
Well, huge is what's going on. I think George is being kind when he points out the situation. I'm convinced that he's convinced that this is all going to go up in a cloud of smoke. That this isn't just... the only reason I brought up the stenographer was because I don't think the stenographer for the House was ever hauled out of the House screaming like a crazy woman.
Okay. Whatever's going to happen is bigger than the 2008, 9, 10, 11 debacle.
It probably is. Yes. You're right.
And that's right. Where we have the Republican Party seeming to just disintegrate or get into internecine warfare. Along those lines, Paul has his own slate of candidates for 2016, and his track record is excellent using Merlin and his other sources of information.
Now, one of the things about the candidates for 2016 is that it probably isn't going to be anything like what anybody thinks it was going to look like. I mean, we again have Hillary as the anointed one, okay, but I don't even think Hillary's going to either run or last in the primaries if she does run. and Rand Paul is the anointed one on the other side, and he couldn't possibly fit into any kind of remaining centrist Republican Party at all. So what I see is, and we've talked about this, and George agrees with you, that it's going to look something like this. Christie, the governor of
New Jersey,
and Andy Cuomo, the governor of New York, running against each other for the major parties, and Rand Paul starting a third party.
And so we've got Paul for a third party, Christie or Cuomo for the Republican Party.
No. Cuomo's a Democrat.
So he's going to be the Democrat.
He's going to be the Democrat, exactly. And Christie's going to be the Republican.
And what happened to Jeb Bush?
Well, if you look at Jeb Bush's run for that period of time, which is also posted, I believe, it's just not going anywhere. And what we found over the almost 25 years of doing this now is that if there's no significant activity at the point, at the thrust point of the events, which in this case would be the fall of 2016, you're not going to end up being president. Mitt Romney had the same problem. You look at Romney's. We looked at Romney's back 2 years before he became the candidate and picked him out and said, this guy's going to be the candidate, and he's going to lose.
I remember that. Fizzle, actually.
Yes, but if you look at Romney's run, it was obvious that was going to happen. I mean, we didn't have to be geniuses to look at this. Anybody who looked at it would have said, well, gee, there's much going on there. Well, right.
Because right after the election, you saw it plateau to nothing, right?
That's right. It went to, and it wasn't very exciting even before the election.
If he would have won, if you saw him as the winner, that track then for 2012, 13, 14 would have been huge, right?
It certainly would have been a lot more huge. And what's interesting is if you look at Romney for 2008, not 12, he would have had a chance in 2008.
Huh.
But what did they do? They ran John McCain, and he went and picked, Madam Palin, which was a complete disaster. And it was almost a foregone conclusion that Obama was going to walk in with that as the opposition. If Romney had been the opposition in 2008, I think it would have been much more interesting and a much more competitive contest between the parties, and I'm not sure I would have picked Obama at all if Romney had been the candidate in 2008, but not 2012.
Because back in 2006, I think you ran tracks on Clinton, Barack, and Mark Warner, and there was nothing there on anybody, right?
That's right, and that's the clue. When you look at it, and there's nothing going on there, there's probably nothing going to go on there.
But fast forwarding to the present, we have an interesting situation where the United States might come apart at the seams, and at the same time, we have a wildly exotic run for Roswell. So that a collapse of the currency and the economy or just dragging on in this endless bickering in Washington may be the small stuff. I know, George, you pay close attention to things in the UFO arena.
Oh, absolutely.
And you have the sense that there's something waiting in the wings to come center stage.
It sure would be nice. I still don't, you know what, going against any tracks, I don't think we're going to get disclosure from governments. It's going to probably come from some whistleblowers.
And that brings in, the WikiLeaks perspective, or the UFO equivalent of Snowden.
That's right.
Somebody
exactly.
to blow the lid.
Somebody's got to say, and here are the files, and I've been looking at them. And, we've got this special place tucked away. We've got to find that. Paul, let me ask you this. Well, we got a few moments.
And by the way, one of our clients is a former U.S. Secretary of Defense. And I've asked him about that, and he claims to not know.
That's possible. I don't think they
Actually,
do know.
You're right. It is possible. It is.
50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination next month. Anything to watch out for track-wise?
Well, when Obama first got elected, we saw a huge dropout of his timeline in the spring and early summer of 2013. We're right where we are now, right where we've been, basically. And what happened perhaps instead, is that his whole administration started to collapse. With all the stuff he went and with all the stupid stuff he went and did by the line in the sand and all of those things. Okay, and maybe what that timeline was trying to tell us is, look, this guy has only got one term and a couple of months of the second term before all hell breaks loose, and it's not going to be in the form of something physically, damaging to the guy. It may just be his whole, political future goes down the drain. But with the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination, and by the way, if you had this app and ran the assassination date for Martin Luther King, which was April 4th, 1968, you would see an enormous time track change. You'd see, and if there was going to be an event that would ring in the same way as the Martin Luther King event did, who would be the perfect person except Obama? I would certainly tell the Secret Police, the Secret Service, maybe his secret police, to keep a real good eye on things over the next 5 to 6 months. Don't you think, George?
Well, there's another thing, George, that we oftentimes use. Timetraks in Merlin is our major tool, but there are other things in the toolbox. And an important notion is time twins.
And what is that?
Oftentimes, individuals will have very similar time tracks. So you can look at one and see major events occurring in their life, and people with the same birthday will have things going on.
Okay.
Now, sometimes things go by time tracks, and it's not detected there. But, for example, and this is probably the oddest connection you've ever had on your show, you look at somebody like Miley Cyrus, who has just rocketed to public attention in a way that's
huge.
Almost goes back to Elvis in its scope and impact. And she's on November 23rd. That's right in Kennedy's time zone, the assassination of John Kennedy. That tells us that is a really empowered set of dates. It actually echoes in a certain way with what's going on with Netflix, of all things. It would take 20 minutes to tie all this together, but it's telling us, again, the Secret Service should be really careful about this year. There's some strange energy swirling around 23s, which, as you well know, is a special number in and of itself.
So when you say they should be careful with everybody?
Well, just heightened alertness in protecting the president.
The president, and what about terrorist activities?
Well, that's a whole other arena, and perhaps in the next segment we can talk about these recent flights into Orlando where there seem to be terrorist rehearsals going on again.
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to do a power grid test in November.